I think it's important that we tell stories about our loss and our trauma and the value that our kids have in our communities.
Along with singing, I don't know, I have a production company. I don't know if this has been the same for you, because you also have one, Get Lifted, is that even though the world has stopped to some degree, the content arm of things has not stopped at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, and Get Lifted is doing a lot of really amazing work. What made you want to get into this part of the entertainment industry, where you're creating and producing content for people?
So I was an English major in college. I've always been interested in great storytelling, great filmmaking. And then as a musician, you start to collaborate with filmmakers as a musician. So my early collaborations with filmmakers were writing songs for films and being involved in the marketing of the films because I wrote songs for them. And my team started to notice that I had influence in these circles and I had a lot of relationships built up. And we figured it'd be uh, really powerful and cool if we were able to help influence the business by getting stories out there that we believed in and working with filmmakers that we believed in. And so we started our production company as a partnership between me, a guy named Mike Jackson that I've been friends with since right after I graduated college, and then our other friend Ty Glorious, who I went to college with, and we know each other's tastes very well. We're all three English majors, love good stories, love good storytelling, and we all have a sense that the world could stand to hear more from our perspective, and we all have good relationships in the business with writers, screenwriters, directors, filmmakers, and we were like, let's come together, form a company, and put out some cool content. We want it to be elevated. We want it to be entertaining. We want it to be commercially viable and provocative.
Yeah, as I mentioned a bit ago, I knew some of the stuff that you were involved in, but it caught me by surprise when I was watching the HBO docuseries, Atlanta's Missing and Murdered, The Lost Children, which is about the Atlanta child
Yeah,
murders. A story I remember at the time, but I was also around that age, so
yeah.
it didn't, of course, and living in Detroit, that didn't obviously impact me the same way because they're right there in that community. How did you guys become a production partner in this?
Well, a lot of times we get pitched projects by filmmakers who are working on something, and they believe that us being involved will help it get made, help it get funded, help it get sold. And so the same thing happened with this. And I didn't know that much about the story. I was alive during that time, but I was pretty young. I was growing up in Ohio, and I just didn't really know much about it. But the more I read about it, it was just an intriguing subject. And I love true crime stories. I've loved a lot of these series that have explored these cases that, um, the resolution of the cases has been suspicious and seemed to be wrought with inconsistencies and possible injustice. And I think those stories are interesting and they're worth being told. And I think it's important that we also tell them about missing Black kids because I feel like so many of these stories we see don't center Black folks as victims worthy of consideration. And I think it's important that we tell stories about our loss and our trauma and the value that our kids have in our communities, because a lot of stories that we see in this area don't center our people.
Mm. And that mentality kind of goes in line with another project that you're heavily involved with, Drawn Arms, which is, I
Yeah.
believe, the story of Tommy Smith.
Yeah, it's about
Who,
Tommy Smith, who was one of the athletes that raised a fist in celebration of Black Power and in protest of what was going on in America at that time to Black people. And he was, condemned and ostracized, and it's kind of a precursor to Colin Kaepernick in so many ways. And obviously, because of Kaepernick's story, because of all the fallout that happened from that, I think that Tommy Smith as an inspiration, and as a precursor to what Colin did, I think is really a powerful story, and one worth being told. And it's really a powerful story, following up with him to see, you know, where his life has gone since then, and the sacrifices that he made, in a really challenging time.
Tommy, I've been on a couple panels with him, and
Yeah,
I think the part that now, we treat everybody heroically, and or treat him heroically, and John Carlos as well, who was on that podium stand with him, and nobody really understands what happened once they got home.
yeah,
And I think I was ecstatic to read that you were doing this project, because that's the component of this that people need to understand. Um,
yeah,
yeah, and to some degree, we have this habit in America of worshiping people kind of in the moment, and not really seeing how something fully impacts their lives. Like, we're doing all this understandably and deservedly so. Like, we're just lionizing, and a lot of praise is being showered on our medical professionals now, those on the front lines, as there should be. My fear is that that will happen, and the attention on the healthcare part and the inequity and what led to this will be ignored, and we'll focus on the cheering, and we'll see them at eventually when we're at sporting events and stuff, and we'll see them recognized at half times and
yeah,
pre-shows. The same thing happened with 9/11. It's like, oh, we saw it there, but we're not going to address some of the things that actually led to that actually happening. So for you to
yeah.
be able to tell the story of Tommy, I think telling the complete story is very important.
And also, he wasn't even celebrated in the time. We have to realize that, in some ways, the reverse happens with a lot of activists, where they're lionized after they die. We've seen that with Martin Luther King, even. I think everybody kind of assumes he was celebrated and loved back then, but his popularity was underwater. Like, he was more hated than he was loved in America in that moment. And so we have to realize that when people quote Dr. King now, when they talk about his legacy, they make it seem like he was this like lovable teddy bear that everyone loved at the time and everyone celebrated, but he was an enemy of the state at the time. The FBI was bugging him and trying to get him to commit suicide. He was unpopular in America, and he was killed before he turned 40 years old. He was not a universally beloved figure, and it was a huge sacrifice for him to um, be out in the forefront so boldly, fighting for justice for us. And the same is the case with Tommy Smith. Um, he was celebrated by some, he inspired a lot of people, but that was an unpopular act for him to do that. And he came back home to a lot of hate.
Yeah.
And we have to realize that when we honor these folks, that they put a lot of sacrifice in, to do these bold acts of standing up to injustice. And we have to do a better job of in the moment, appreciating their work and celebrating them and protecting them. I think we've tried to do that with Colin. A lot of folks have. He still doesn't have a job in the NFL, but I think he's been also really beloved by a lot of folks in America and respected, and he's inspired a lot of folks in America. And I think that's mitigated some of the fallout for him as well. But he definitely paid a price.
Yeah, isn't it interesting how Tommy Smith and Colin Kaepernick are seen as unpatriotic, but yet people out here protesting to get their fucking haircut are considered the real patriots?
Yeah, and they're out there. Not only are they out there protesting, but they're out there with military style guns. Colin literally went on his knees out of respect and out of kind of reverence for our veterans and our and trying to be as respectful to society and to this nation as possible while still protesting. And these idiots are out here with guns, and um, just terrorizing their communities because they disagree with the governors of their state. And they tell us we need to be more respectful when we protest, but they don't really believe that. They just want us to shut up.
Yeah, pretty much. You've always been somebody who's, or at least through, I would say through most of your career, but just in general, you've always been really comfortable expressing how you feel socially, politically. Why was it important for you to use your platform to bring attention to issues like what we just discussed, even the work you're doing with COVID-19? You do a ton of charity work, speaking. Why was it important for you to be more than just an artist?
To me, that was part of what being an artist was. Even when I was young, um, I looked up to Stevie Wonder. I looked up to so many great artists that also were leading movements. And excuse me. And so for me, if you define what being an artist was as a public figure, as someone who had influence in the world, I would never separate that from also speaking out about how the world needs to be a better place, how it can be more loving, how it can be more just, how we can make it more beautiful together. And so to me, that's just part of who I am as an artist. But also, I think I'm particularly political. Like, I grew up reading about justice movements. I grew up reading about leaders, and I grew up interested in history and politics. And so part of it's just my own personal interest. Like, I like this stuff. I'm interested in this stuff. I read about it all the time, and I have opinions. And what does Twitter exist for if not for us to put our takes out there?
Oh, I know.
But honestly, though, so I'm in a position of influence, and I feel like I can help shape the conversation and help people think about things that they may not have thought about before. And I read about these things and care about these things so much that I couldn't waste that position, couldn't waste that influence and just shut up and sing. I gotta talk about it.
Did you, or have you ever felt as if your opinions, and even your support of political candidates, do you feel like it's ever cost you professionally?
I'm sure there's some cost, but I think there's also some benefit, and it might offset each other, honestly, for me. Because as an artist, part of what um, people love about an artist is their authenticity. They love if they have a point of view that they feel is honest and justified and comes from a good place, a true place. I think that makes them love the artist more. And so I think I've probably won fans, excuse me, I probably won some fans because they feel like they respect the fact that I step out and speak out about these things. But also, there are certainly people that are like, I'll never go to his concert because he hates Trump and I love Trump, and I love all of me, but I don't want to go see him perform it and give him money because he's spoken out against the president that I love. I'm sure there's somebody out there like that. Some people don't care as much. They vote differently from you, but they still want to listen to your music. And then there are probably a few, like I said, that are like, I'll never buy his albums again. And
I,
that's just the price you have to pay. But I think it's offset by the fact that a lot of people like the fact that I'm honest. Like, a lot of people like the fact that I speak out for the little person that may not be heard otherwise, and they think that makes me cooler in their mind and makes them want to buy my music more. So I think it probably balances out.